morning, everyone. Welcome to the third day of our conference. I hope you've enjoyed the previous 2 days. This is the final day, and we're going to hear some very interesting presentations. Our first presentation for today is entitled Enmity in the Intellectual World, What Do They Stand For? And it will be given by my dear colleague and friend Gazela Pudar Drasko from the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory. Gazela Pudar has been studying intellectuals for a while now. Her PhD dealt with the sociology of intellectuals, and today she's going to kind of refract enmity through the prism of the sociology of intellectuals. So we'll see another angle of the phenomenon of enmity, and without further ado, I would like to give the word to Gazela.
Well, good morning from my side also. Just a second. Techniques. Well, for the beginning, I would just like to say that I hope that you will all understand me. My English pronunciation is not so soft and attractive like Melania Trump, but at least I did write my speech alone in these previous days, so pardon me for some mistakes. As Marian already mentioned, I'm dealing with sociology of intellectuals quite a while. That was the theme of my master thesis, but also of my PhD. And basically, the thing which I'm interested in is intellectuals as a factor of social change. This topic today, which I would like to present, is trying to connect the sociology intellectuals from one point of view and politics of enmity, which is the theme of this conference, from another point of view. I have to say that major attempts to study intellectuals are focused on academia and inner circles of knowledge production. All exploration of outer engagement in civil society, which can be regarded as engagement for social change, actually, remains quite fragmentary. It is quite difficult to explore engagement of intellectuals and their contribution in the society, which should really be the focus of sociology of intellectuals, as they are frequently taken as individuals, far from being a group, from being strata or a class, although there were some theories which were regarding them as a class. Patrick Bayard, for example, in a recent article, emphasized the lack of studies dealing with public engagement of intellectuals, which should be their core differentia specifica, basically. He names Bourdieu, Charles Camus, and Randall Collins as contemporary fathers of sociology of the intellectuals, and I have to say that I got the book of Randall Collins, which is called Sociology of Philosophy's Global Theory of Intellectual Change, which is this big book with more than 1,000 pages from origins of intellectual thought in ancient Greece, in ancient India, in China, which is really interesting, and if you're interested, I recommend to read it, although I didn't read it yet because it's really voluminous. Naming them as public intellectuals, Bayard seeks to stress their role in society, their engagement in public realm, which is terra incognita, which should be explored, since we would need all to know how ideas, theories, and concepts find its way to the public itself and public discourse. I myself find the term public intellectual quite redundant, since I believe that there is no non-public intellectual. So being public, standing in the public, is intrinsic to being intellectual. All those who are not in the public, coming from academia, are simply coming from academia. They are experts, they are professors, they are sociologists, but they are not intellectuals. So when I say intellectuals, I always mean somebody who is publicly engaged. I perceive intellectuals as the loose elite network of specific social actors who possess advanced knowledge or creativity, which is recognized in the cultural field of academia and or art, who have certain authority or power to be listened, which is based on that authority, and they are publicly engaged. So that's something without what we cannot claim that there is intellectual. It is frequent assumption that intellectuals are fading away, bearing in mind the moral authorities of the past time, like Zola was, like Solzhenitsyn was for many people, Sakharov, Andrei Sakharov, etc. However, there are those who oppose to the paradigm of intellectual decline and finding deceiving, including me, like Bayard, Bauman, Bourdieu, and others. The paradigm itself comes from perception that intellectuals fail to speak truth to the power, which is something which is said by Havel, by Edward Said later. And it comes from perception that they fail to address the public as they did in the past. So there is perception that something was happening in the past, that they were addressing public in much more than they are doing today. And in previous years, there is one more set of arguments who emerge claiming the fall of intellectuals. And these arguments are linked with the social conditions of knowledge production, claiming the extremely increased specialization of knowledge production, leads to limited space for intellectual engagement on one side. That is something, for example, Jacobi would say. In addition, universities, as a source of intellectual realm, possess intertwined interests with other social realms like economy, like politics, which limits the scope of engagement of intellectuals. This is, of course, related to the normative argument that intellectuals are independent and that they speak truth to the power, which I highly contest. And it's somehow seen that they are becoming instrument for production of social order, and finally, they are satisfying economic needs in society through their engagement. I think that all this is deceiving in several ways. First, there is, even in 1937, Robert Michels claimed that observing intellectuals as an immanently revolutionary is not in accord with the facts. Contrary to that, intellectuals are officers and subalterni of all arms and all of armies, of those revolutionary, of those reactionary, and of those reformative political forces. So they can be found everywhere. So we cannot, if we are too bound to rigorous sociological methods, which somebody challenged, but still, claim that intellectuals ever were independent from the social conditions of their society or today of the global society, nor that they, as a social network as I see them, could claim moral characteristic of few individuals who were perceived as their protagonists. Already mentioned Sakharov, Solzhenitsyn, and others. Therefore, I strongly agree with Jerome Karabel, who wrote 20 years ago, I will quote, "It is thus misleading to assume, as does much of existing literature, that intellectuals will typically adopt an oppositional stance toward the existing order. Most of them have, after all, attained a relatively privileged position within it, and their well-being often depends upon the acquisition of the resources controlled by political and economic elites, with whom they are socially and culturally linked. From this vantage point, what needs to be explained is less why intellectuals reach accommodation with the status quo, than what is it that causes some of them at certain historical moments to rebel. So it is not why they are doing that, what they're doing, what is perceived as a fault intellectuals. It's actually, we need to research what is the conditions which contribute to rebelling of the intellectuals, to getting them to the position of dissidents, which is, in my opinion, quite narrower group of intellectuals opposing to the order. Secondly, this is deceiving as there are many new channels of intellectual engagement to the public which did not exist before and which are frequently missed in analysis. Public space has been, in a way, democratized in character of previous 2 decades, allowing significantly more equality in participation and expression, if we observe online realm. I have to emphasize this. Of course, we have to be very careful to impose such conclusion on the global scale, having in mind also censorship, which is becoming stronger in the internet every day, especially in some parts of the world. It's very strong, like Russia, China, not to mention North Korea at all. But in general, the tendency to go online without obstacles could be emphasized. That is precisely why I choose to focus on online expression of renowned intellectuals of global community in this lecture. Why do I choose intellectuals and their discourses worth of analysis? I believe that intellectuals do indicate social change and its directions. They are a valuable part of societal landscape, capable of and useful for legitimation of it, or sometimes delegitimation, of the prevailing order. I do not go so far here that I claim that they are leaders of the social change, which can be sometimes heard, as I tend to agree with Bourdieu when he says that intellectuals are dominated fraction of dominant class. However, my research focuses on the exploration of the social engagement of intellectuals as bearers of ideological power or symbolic power, and their embeddedness into power relations. I research with curiosity whether intellectuals are only messengers of other power-propertied groups, or they could claim power for themselves, as some theories in the past, especially in the late communist period, emphasized, mostly known here, Convent, Seleni, Gilas were talking about the new class. Although that new class was not what I consider today as intellectuals, it's more intelligentsia, which is wider term. Maybe, in the end, I would say that maybe intimately I believe what Gullner said in 1979, that intellectuals are our best card in the history. So that's my motivation why I research them. But could we claim that the most influential intellectuals, although we can rightfully pose the questions, how do we define influential intellectuals and what is the influence of intellectuals, deploy in the discourse a seed of a social change, and if yes, in what direction? That's my main research question. I named this lecture, this speech, with the title Enmity Intellectual Worth, and I wrote it in the abstract. I wrote in the abstract in the abstract book which you received. Without enmity, there is no struggle, and without struggle, there is no change. So that's a connection which I strongly believe links intellectuals with the theme of this conference. It doesn't matter if we believe that intellectuals are only messengers of other social groups, nor if they are real actors of social change. In both scenarios, perception of enmity relation and own identification with one of the sides perceived indicates desired direction of social change, which are to be found in society. Therefore, my interest in the main enmity relations and whether we could claim that it personifies ideological clashes in a globalized world. In the opening of this conference on Monday, Petar Bojanic, director of our institute, suggested that this politics of enmity means that we are capable of manipulating enmity, that it is possible to utilize enmity in some way. Even if he concluded with a statement, paradoxically, that the figure of the enemy and enmity does not leave much hope, that there can be no negotiation with the enemy, and enmity does not leave much hope, transformation of there cannot be transformation of enemy into the friend, according to him. I think I want to challenge that statement here and today, precisely because we speak on politics of enmity, on manipulation, as he already said, of the enmity. I argue that enmity is changeable. And I argue that intellectuals are those actors who are giving the meaning, the visibility to the enmity through its discourse and narratives. They, in fact, tell us who is our enemy, and more important, they are those who slowly but steadily can change the enemy through the time. My first subtitle, already, what do they stand for? But before that, I wanted to name this lecture Aiming for Global or National. But which could be somehow better linked to this theme of the conference, which is dealing with nations and national in a way. But I thought that having the whole analysis which I conducted, it would be redundant, because I do not claim that any of the intellectuals which I was researching do not aim of national. Even when they do, I here take them as global intellectuals. And therefore, I could say that I miss the important, huge, but still important aspect of national actions of intellectuals in this which I'm talking today. National in terms of the nation-state borders primarily, which I cannot reach due to primarily language barrier, because many of them are speaking languages which are not English, and I'm speaking only English, which is something I'm really deeply sad sometimes about. Which I think I miss many things, but still, that is what is my limitation in the analysis, so I can focus only on those who are speaking English. But I couldn't also reach those who are not speaking in the national terms when it comes to nation state, but also in nationalistic terms, because they are, as I will show later, they are not to be found on the global level so much. Intellectuals observed here are precisely global intellectuals entering the online public space, and more specifically online public space in English, which is today a lingua franca. For sure that they act and write in the national context, but they are internationally recognized figures, probably fully satisfying the criteria which you can see on the screen. And it can be also noted that majority of these named intellectuals in this research are employed at universities. So majority of them come from university, which somehow puts the focus of intellectual engagement on academia. First, who are them shortly? These global intellectuals publish in renowned English-speaking newspapers and magazines, or to be precise, those proclaimed world thinkers by British Prospect magazine in 2013, 14, and 15. The list of included intellectuals is based on repetition of their name on the list in these 3 years, so I took all who were there at least twice. So basically, those who appeared only in 1 year, I didn't take them, like, for example, Yanis Varoufakis, who was really actual in 2015 due to also political engagement. The analysis was focused on their online published articles, blogs, op-eds, anything I could find online in previous 4 years, so from 2013 to basically August of 2016, which was the point when I collected all the articles. And I collected all of them. It was approximately 390 articles, and made a sample because obviously I didn't have time to go through all of them. And I took 1/4 of the whole articles, which were analyzed with the intention to fully complete it for publishing these texts if I managed to do that. So there were 106 contributions which were analyzed, which were submitted for discourse analysis, where I was searching for narratives and framings, operationalizing enmity relations, and those pinpointing to desired change, because that was the key thing. What are the opposition which are appearing in the narratives discourse of intellectuals, and what is desired change they are proposing? Those are two things which were main focus of me. So how do world thinkers operationalize otherness in their discourse? I just want to emphasize that here on this list there are 3 red names. They are those names who appear all 3 times. So on all 3 lists, only those 3 appeared every year. And this number, which you can see, that's the number of articles I could find online belonging as which they authored, basically. Obviously, economy and economists are really dominant in the whole group of the people, but there are also many other philosophers and writers also. Those, as you see, Arundhati Roy, Indian writer, is really the most present, let's say, online person. So what are the top words which they used? You can say that definitely some contemporary, some modern tools for analysis, like MaxQuad or something, give very, very useful tools for analyzing the data which we collected. So people was the word which was the most frequent in all these articles, in all 390 articles. That's definitely the word which resonates the more and the word which they stand for the most. As you can see, there is a lot, again, mentioning of economy in different way. There is a change, there is a climate, which was really strong emphasized because beside Naomi Klein, which is familiar, known to all of us for fighting to global change, many of them also engaged with this theme. And also other words which you can see were quite prominent. And I have to say that many of these intellectuals write, work, and they are present when it comes to India. So Arundhati Roy is coming from India. Also Raghuram Rajan, or Rajan, if I'm pronouncing his name well, is quite known economist from India. But also other people were writing a lot about India, which was really interesting for me. So what are the opposition which I could find, which can be some indications of enmity relations? First, I will start with some which appeared less, let's say, which were less frequent. That is Germany and the rest of European Union. As you can see, in many quotations, there is Germany, which is seen as a hegemony in Europe, and state which is claiming to be the one which is leading the European policy and imposing its austerity measures or policy, especially when it comes to migration solutions to other, especially southern European countries, but it can also be said for Eastern European countries. It depends on the concrete topic. Then it's westernized or Western world, which we can quite easily say that looking at some of these quotations, that they are perceived as supreme towards the other, and the other in in many cases was Russia, which was perceived as authoritarian. You can see here its ideological threat to Putinism. So there is even a coined word for the regime which is in Russia, which is really completely ideologically different in many ways from the Western world. And this is quite often mentioned as other, although there are also some other states, but Russia was the most dominant among all of them. Also, which was very interesting, in several occasions, there was racism of the Western world, which was mentioned, that especially linked to the climate. As you can see here, Naomi Klein is stating that actually Western world was embracing in some way racism in behavior toward other countries in the world, because the Western world is that one who has the power to change the things, to change the policies which affects climate change. And when they are refused to do that, basically they are doing that at the cost of the poor countries. So there is a kind of racism which is noticed in these international relations. Then it was national and supranational or international or European. So there is analysis of European Union and the situation, the crisis, which is linked to the not only migration but primarily to the economic crisis, which was here taken. And there is basically statement that there is a clash between European Union and the nation state, and the European Union is becoming, or it is bureaucratized international body which doesn't have any connection to democracy. So there is any control over that body, and that is something where there is a clash between national state, which is based still on democracy, democratic rules, and for European Union that cannot be said. There is also something which was mentioned quite oftenly, like Piketty says here. So there is national self-interest, so some kind of nationalism when it comes to giving advantage to your own interest instead of European interest, something which was notified here. And again, one more quotation which is pointing to the lack of democratic rules on the European level. But this quotation was really interesting for me because I think it also personifies. It's very well connected to the top words which I mentioned in the beginning. Either way, the enemy is the people, as Arundhati Roy says, and in many of these, in almost all of these articles, people are somehow on one side of the story, and another side of the story are politicians and global capitalist powers. So financial capitalists, large capitalists, those who possess the power and who are interlinked with the politicians, they are standing on one side in each of the countries, so it doesn't matter, it's global phenomena. And on another side, there are people. So the enemy of the capital is the people in this way. Enemy of the politicians, of the regime, are the people. And that was really, really striking from the many articles when you see. And I will just explain a little bit more about. So on one side, you have marginalized people, or commons, as my dear friend Adriana would call them in her papers, and privileged people, elite in some way. And it has to be said that the intellectuals never see themselves as elite openly. So they are not talking about themselves when they are talking about privilege and about elites. So you have developed worlds from one side, you have poor countries from another side, you have vast majority of the commons, of the people, you have elite minority, which is actually ruling the economy, ruling the political processes, and media, so ruling everything. You have ordinary families on one side, and you have wealthy, which we are treating with kid gloves, as Paul Krugman said, and very wealthy, very poor. So there is a huge emphasis on inequality, basically. And inequality is economic inequality in most of the terms when they mention. They usually talk about rich people, about powerful people, about poor and wealthy. Also, there is something which is very often emphasized in the articles, is that there is manipulation of the public by the powerful and wealthy, because those two are very interconnected, for their own interests. So that is something which is also, we can bring it back to the maybe not Victorian, but before Victorian period when there is portraying poor and unfortunate people as morally defective. So that's coming back again on the stage. And there are like several intellectuals which are really emphasizing this, and this second quotation is really pinpointing that part. Gone are the days when the upper classes were terrified of the angry mob wanting to smash their skulls and confiscate their properties. Now their biggest enemy is the army of the lazy bums, whose lifestyle of indolence and hedonism, financed by crippling taxes on the rich, is sucking the lifeblood out of economy. So there is very strong pinpoint that those who are poor, they deserve to be poor because they are lazy, they are not working. And we could often hear such arguments when there was this discussion about the Greek crisis, that they are not working, they are lazy, and poor people from Germany, from northern countries, they're really working a lot and paying their debts and their life, basically. But there is also not manipulation also only with the public, with the discourse, but there is manipulation inside of the system, which is also performed by powerful and the wealthy for their own interests. And there are several very good quotations, which I will enlist here. So markets are controlled by those people. So markets are not free. And it doesn't matter if we have those who are claiming who are libertarian, so who wants completely free market, or other who are more left. They all claim that there is connection between powerful and wealthy and functioning of the market, which is not free. So that's something which was emphasized quite often. Also, there is, let's say, cruelty in some way, that those who are rich, they are calculating that it's more their interest to let some people die who are poor, who cannot afford culture or anything else, than to pay the price themselves for protecting those people, for protecting the earth in the end, because it's usually linked to the climate change. They obviously rig the system, distort policy priorities, because policy is very strongly intervened with the politics, so there is no free market in that sense. And as Zizek said, somebody is doing the choosing while others, common people, do the risking. So there is risk society, but still the risk is not equally divided. Risk is on the bunch of the poor people, while the wealthy people can enjoy all the benefits of the contemporary social order. They also, this last quotation is from Mao Yushi. Mao Yushi is Chinese economist, and he's strongly libertarian orientation. So even he claims that there is simply intervening of the politicians and big enterprises which endanger, from this point of view, I mean, he's libertarian, obviously, that's endangering free functioning of the market, which should be very free. What are the causes of these elements which I have mentioned? So definitely economic downturn is something which is really affecting all other aspects of social life. So if economy is going bad, if economy is declining, everything else falls apart. Habermas, of course, he's saying that capitalism is something which it has inherently tendency to demolish social cohesion, so that the order as it is something which needs to be changed. And unfair means that something, inequality, injustice is something which is very much linked each and another, although Amartya Sen is standing somewhere in the center, I would say, because he's very well balancing between personal responsibility and social responsibility. And of course, Piketty is claiming that if we do not have policies which are limiting inequality, then we have everything else. We have right-wing rising, we have we are creating the other where the other is not existing. We blame some other states, we blame some other people, so that's the root of everything comes from economy. What I was particularly looking forward to see is how they perceive the left and right. So it was not only left which I was seeking, but they were mostly talking about what is the failure of the left, then what is the failure of the right, because right is on the rise. So I will here just pinpoint a few things. So this was really interesting for me. So the thing which was the frequently mentioned, and it was going through other also texts, is that that left basically failed to fulfill its basic cause, and they became conservatives, but they just want to improve that order which was established by conservatives. So there is no any other vision of society except to improve what is existing. There is no middle way when there is where there is real danger. So we need to stick to the extremes in a way. We need to find how to solve the things, and we have to come up with coherent alternative vision which is lacking, and that's something which is expectation from the left. And Amartya Sen is saying that left, he is talking about American left dominantly. They're obsessed with one thing, that's American imperialism, and there are many, many other things which should be the topic of the left than that one single thing, and he sees that as a biggest problem with the left. And basically, in the end, people are moving to right. Everything is moving to right, and that's why that is happening, because left cannot attract people. They cannot explain why the values and causes, if they have it, and that is strongly contested here, are something which should be beneficial for them, because they are those same people, as you know from here, also from Serbia, they are the same people who are striving for better social policies, but they are voting for those who are not going to give them those better social policies. So there is this discrepancy which was notified. And can we hope that anything could be changed? Who should change? That's also the crucial question. And many of them mention that it is street movement, it is mass movement, it is social, it is people's movement who should do something and who should engage. Of course, this was selected from the newspaper articles, and we cannot go in deep how do they believe, how they expect that these people will engage, because that's something which is definitely the biggest problem. Depression and lack of engagement of the ordinary people is something which is leading to everything which is happening. But there is no any contemplation except that they should do something, how they should do something. And also there is a polarization. You can see here that first two are very positive in the terms that social movement can change things as a movement. The third statement says that they cannot change as a movement. They need to go in the politics. They need to become the part of the system, of political system, and offer alternative and win the power. And if they win the power through the system, then they will change the system. And there were very few very good examples. I think that Arundhati Roy was writing that one of the Indian states in India, because India has a lot of states like United States or similar, and all of them have their independent policies. And one of them, there was a strong movement for, I think it was for equality. I was not particularly clear what is it about, but the movement managed to change some things in the community, and then it split it. It split it because part of the movement, led by one leader, wanted to register as a party and to try to compete in the political market, and other part of the movement didn't want. And this example is interesting because that part which did register won the power. So they basically formed the government, which was, let's say, 2 months after the founding the party, and they changed the policies. So the first steps which they introduced were quite beneficial for the ordinary peoples who were paying some tax for the ordinary drinking water, which was firstly abolished when they came to power. So that was example that movement can change something, but they need to come into the system. And this is something very interesting also from the Indian author, is that there is absence of serious social conflict, and that's why we don't have strong social movements. So still there is not, the equality is not so huge, and the conflict itself in the societies, whether on the national level but also on the global level, are not unbearable. So we have to come to the point, which I also fully agree, we have to come to the point when changes, when the clashes and the conflicts are unbearable, the things are bearable, that we have the social change. And that is something which was pointed out also here. What are the visions of the change? I was not particularly amused, nothing new I could see, but Habermas is talking about transnationalization of democracy. So we need to overcome national states, basically. So European Union needs to become more than it is, more than economic union, monetary union. It has to really work on the common social policies, on the common grounds, and people need to understand that they have to simply become part of something bigger. There is also a very, very good book of Mark Mazover. It's Creating the Global or something like that. I forgot the name. It's 2 years old, I think, which is explaining how the United Nations and other forms of international organizations emerge. So how individual states, especially great powers like Britain in the first example, France and United States, how they allowed creating international bodies, and what is the dynamics of transferring some powers to those bodies, which is really challenging. And even today we are not very much aware of how United Nations function, for example, but it's very interesting if I recommend for reading. Change of culture is also needed, and in that change of culture we need all to publicly engage. So we somehow have to change this, which is quite present not only in India, where the author is coming from originally, but also in our regions. We need to change that corruption is normal, that doing something which is benefiting you but not your community is normal. So that's something which needs to be changed. Very strong emphasis with many intellectuals is that change means providing more public goods, so more state, but not in the terms that state have to plan. So it's not planned economy, which we had at some point of our history, but it's more in the terms of welfare state. And there is also from this Brazilian philosopher, but also politicians, very active politician, who is saying that experimentation and revision according to what works for the specific projects are something which we need to take very seriously. And he's speaking also a lot. This is something which I wanted to point out in the end. Slavoj Žižek is talking, I don't know if you have read that article, he is talking about Margaret Thatcher as ideal for the left. Ideal in the way that that was a woman, if that was only her, but that was a woman who changed the discourse, who changed completely the ideology, not of its part, her own party of conservatives, of Tories, but it changed the discourse of the Labour Party, of the enemy. So the enemy adopted the language of her language in this case. So we need somebody who will be, Žižek calls master, which is not something I really particularly like as a term, but we need a master, somebody who will have a courage and who will be able to change the language and to impose its own values on the enemy in this case. What is the role of intellectuals? Unger, which I already mentioned, is somebody who is very, very harshly talking about intellectuals and about social sciences in general. He says that social sciences are completely embedded in the system, they serve to the system, so there is no something which Wright Mills many years ago called sociological imagination in terms of sociology, but here structural imagination. So there is no anything in papers we produce as a social scientist which can pinpoint something new, something which can be considered as a direction to the change, basically. So he's speaking about intellectual bankruptcy here. Changes in ideas and values, that is something which it is the role, basically, of intellectuals, changing the discourse in somehow, and it's done by many of them, and it's something which, as Rebecca Solnit claims in several articles, that's something which will not happen over the night. So there are the things which we are doing step by step, we believe, and that's something which maybe can encourage us somehow. We believe that there is no meaning, that it's not meaningful, that nothing is changing. But at some point, all these small steps will combine and we will have a change. So let's believe that she has a right. And of course, Habermas, that's obviously something he would say. We need to submit everything to critical analysis, to rational examination. There is nothing which can be taken for granted. We need to, even our traditions, all our practices, everything needs to be submitted to reasoned approval. And I don't know what is the time, but I hope I'm not taking too long. Okay. In the end, I just want to point shortly that international focus was obvious because those are global intellectuals, and it's obvious that they are dealing with international matters. The thing which was really in all the article, there is no anyone who is questioning the market. So that's something, even when they are strongly advocating the left or progressivist position, they are all simply not contesting the market. They are all advocating greater role of the state. The role it's not state capitalism, as they say, but it is the greater role in the terms of transferring the diminishing inequality, in terms that they simply have to distribute the goods according to in order to diminish inequality. There is also flexibility, which was asked in the structure. So we need not to have a rigid structure. We need to think what is better for the concrete solutions, for the concrete contexts. Inequality, I already said. There is seeking for greater mobilization from their side, and all of that is leading, and the goal of all what they are seeking seeking to achieve is basically empowerment of humanity. That is one overall goal which we can say that intellectuals are striving for, but that empowerment is something which can be done only through the system. So there was not single intellectual which was going somewhere outside of the system, observing somehow from the side, although they are talking about having innovative ideas, having something new, but all of them are thinking through the system in this. So that was my main conclusion of the analysis which I was conducting. That would be all I would say today.